Brooks, Rick Moranis, Daphne Zuniga, and of course, Mel Brooks himself. I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and hang out with us because we'll be right back. This thing, The Virginian, it's not even a remake of the Gary Cooper movie. It's based on the original novel from the 1800s. Who wrote that? Owen Wister, right? They should have had Mel Brooks punch it up a little bit.
See Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs next on TNT.
Joe Bob Briggs here, and what could be more appropriate on Martin Luther King's birthday than a Mel Brooks movie, The Man Who Put the Black Sheriff in Blazing Saddles. Yes, we're continuing our We Love Mel Brooks No Matter How Many Toilet Jokes He Does festival with this month's Mel Brooks flick, Spaceballs. And I admit it, I am one of those guys who does laugh at duty jokes. In fact, the other day I got reprimanded for laughing. I was on an airplane and I was told to stop it. Stop that laughing. Evidently, it's a new rule, no laughing on airplanes. What happened is I got to talking to this woman in the next seat and we started telling stories, and pretty soon, I have to admit it, I'm not proud of it, but I can't lie to you, we laughed. Unfortunately, after about 5 minutes of laughing, the flight attendant came up to me and she said, "Would you mind being a little quieter? The people behind you are requesting it." I said, "You mean the people right directly behind me?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "You mean the people who are like 4 feet away from me, but they summoned you to ask me that? Is this a way of bringing the whole corporate influence of American Airlines to bear on this situation?" And she said, "Well, they might want to sleep." It was 7 o'clock. The flight was traveling between Las Vegas and New York City, neither city known for residents who retire at 7 p.m. So I told the woman, "Okay, we won't laugh." And then, of course, I immediately started laughing because I couldn't help it. One thing that happens when you start laughing is that no matter what anybody says to you, you can't stop laughing. So somebody could say, "I just shot your dog," and you'd still have at least half a smile on your face. So in this case, it was impossible. I looked at my partner in laughing crime here, and as soon as our eyes met, we started laughing even louder than before. Then she put her hand over my mouth. Of course, this made me laugh. Then we started to sputter. You know, sputtering is that thing that happens when you want to laugh, but you're trying not to laugh. You can only sputter for about 10 seconds at a time. Then you have to make some loud, obnoxious sound like a snort. And once you hear a snort, that's funny. And so it creates more laughter. Now, I wonder if the airlines have considered the implications of the no laughing policy. By its nature, the policy creates laughter. Who makes up those laws? Well, set all those rules aside, because tonight we're going to laugh here as we watch the Mel Brooks comedy Spaceballs. Rick Moranis, Bill Pullman. I'll do the drive-in totals later. 3 stars, roll the movie. Remember when your 3rd grade teacher would say, "Wipe that grin off your face this instant"? Did that ever work? Wipe that smirk off. See, the idea of wiping something off of your face, that's funny. You know, that may be an all-time low, even by Mel Brooks standards. Jamming the radar, hurling a bottle of jam at a satellite dish. Followed by, funny, she doesn't look Drewish. The man has no shame, does he? Which is why we love him. Nothing like a green laser ray to the crotch to get me chuckling, you know, and beam me up, snotty. John Candy is a half-man, half-dog named Barf. You can never say Mel is too highfalutin for his audience, can you? And remember that guy who did all the sound effects from the Police Academy flicks? Michael Winslow. We used him very big in the 80s because Spaceballs came out in 1987. So let's see, 10 years after Star Wars. No, it's not too late to do a parody. There was a short film that came out right after Star Wars called Hardware Wars, where they used all these household appliances. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I'd rather wait for my parodies, gosh darn it, until I've forgotten the details of the original flick. Like, I'm not sure if Bill Pullman is supposed to be a Luke Skywalker ripoff or a Han Solo ripoff. I guess he's Han Solo, and there is no Luke Skywalker. So let's just do these drive-in totals, and we'll get back to it. We have no dead bodies, no breasts, radar jamming, 1 crash landing, exploding spacecraft, oxygen vacuuming, gratuitous double mint twins, gratuitous guy who can do sound effects with his mouth, gratuitous alien parody. In fact, everything in a Mel Brooks movie is just gratuitous. That's what Mel is all about. So anyhow, let's do the ads and get back to Spaceballs. There's also a C-3PO ripoff. Dot Matrix is the character, featuring the voice of Joan Rivers. You know who's actually in the gold suit, though, of Dot Matrix? Laureen Yarnell. Remember Shields and Yarnell? Of course you do, the mimes of choice from the 70s. People just couldn't get enough of Shields and Yarnell on Sonny and Cher, so the network gave them their own show in 1977, same year Star Wars came out, and I believe that closes the circle. The sand dunes of Yuma, Arizona, standing in for wherever they're supposed to be in this movie. It was 115 in the shade when they were shooting out there in the sand. The film melted, total nightmare. And Mel Brooks said, to work like this, you really need a sense of Yuma. He's a cut-up, isn't he? I bet you guys don't know this about Mel Brooks. He was in the Army in World War II, and his job was to deactivate landmines before the infantry was sent into action. And the first combat he saw was the Battle of the Bulge, 1944. How you go from defusing bombs to being one of the most well-known comedy directors in the world, I'm not exactly sure, but there's probably a link, right? Not only a director, but an actor, a writer. He writes those lines like, I was found on the doorstep of a monastery somewhere in the Ford galaxy. I like that line. Of course, our favorite Mel Brooks role around here is the voice of Mr. Toilet Man in Look Who's Talking Too. All right, commercials and then back to the flick. Joan Rivers' performance is kind of subdued in this movie, you know? Where's that Joan that we love from the Academy Awards? That's her natural habitat. You know, bears need to be in the woods, fish need to be in the ocean, and Joan Rivers needs to be at the Oscars. Am I the only one who thinks Rick Moranis is the funniest guy in this movie? I think he's great as Dark Helmet. The critics panned this flick, though. They all said stuff like, Spaceballs has an overdose of bucks and an underdose of yucks. But of course, the audience doesn't care about that stuff, and it was Mel's most successful comedy in years. I say comedy because, if you recall, Mel Brooks has produced several more serious flicks like The Elephant Man and 84 Charing Cross Road, and of course, my favorite, The Fly. Mel has an interesting way to figure out what jokes to use in his movies. It's based on this thing that the Marx Brothers used to do when they were working out a new film. They'd perform the script in vaudeville houses before a live audience, and if a joke got a laugh, it stayed in. And if it didn't, they chucked it. Well, Mel Brooks and his writing partners, Thomas Meehan and Ronnie Graham, Ronnie died just last year on the 4th of July, as a matter of fact. But anyway, they wrote a first draft of Spaceballs that was 315 pages long. Now, an average comedy script is about like this, about 90 to 100 pages. So they give this 315-page script to 50 people, and they tell them to put checks by the stuff they like and X's by the stuff that they don't like. So the first script was mostly X's. Then they did a 240-page version, and finally they got it down to 126 pages, and that's the one they shot. And then they have what they call the death cut. They screen a rough version of the flick for the secretaries and various people working on the studio lot, and whatever they like stays in, and whatever doesn't get a laugh goes out. So, you guys feel closer to the process now? I know I do. All right, ads and then back to the flick. When somebody asked Mel Brooks if he thought humor today goes too far, he said, you can't go too far if you're intelligent and your heart is in the right place. You can only go too far if you're stupid and you don't have anything to say. But here's my question, Mel. That comb the desert joke, where you take a giant comb and you overruled the committee on that one, didn't you? I love that stunt double gag. That made me laugh. And this movie was dangerous to shoot, because one time Dick Van Patten, who plays King of the Druids, of course, Dick was decked out in the king's robes and the whole schmear, and the crown slipped on his head and cut his eyelid. And in fact, earlier the crown had cut his nose. I mean, come on! Can we not afford a stunt double for Dick during the crown scenes? Anyway, it's time for Joe Bob's Advice to the Hopeless, with help from someone who has a couple of stunt doubles of her own, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. Rusty the TNT Mail Girl, here she is.
So how come you weren't around for the first movie?
What?
What do you mean, what? You usually host the movie before this, too. From up in the mansion.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anything about that.
Oh. Were you not fulfilling your obligations to Miss Verona?
No comment.
Did you not have the proper tool for the job?
Do you have a letter for me?
Sore spot, huh? Yes, I do. It's an email. It is from Janet Booth of Connecticut.
Hey. Hey, dude. I meant to write last week after Dirty Dancing. You probably had lots of answers telling you that the song Patrick Swayze sings is She's Like the Wind. Yeah, the sappy one that plays when he drives off looking like he's not going to come back. And as for your other question of the evening, Richard Marx is known for Right Here Waiting for You. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I will be right here waiting for you. Sounds like a stalker. Remember that song?
Yes.
And Hold On to the Nights. You know, that's it. That Right Here Waiting, one of the great stalker power ballads of the 80s, wasn't it? If we see you this week, it means the world as we know it didn't end at midnight on 1/1/2000. I doubt it will. But if we all go the way of most drive-ins down the tubes, it's been nice watching you. Happy New Year, or as I like to say, Happy Nude Year. Janet, JB from Connecticut. Will you be ringing in the new year with Grape Knee High? It'll be Corbel for moi. Thanks, Janet. Happy Nude Year to you, too. And by the way, you guys can send me emails through our website at tnt.turner.com/JoeBob, or go the snail mail route, care of TNT 1010 Techwood Drive, Atlanta, Georgia 30318. And yes, as a matter of fact, this is Grape Knee High. It's actually from Oklahoma. It's 3-2 Grape Knee High. At least during working hours it is. And I'm still here, so...
At least for the second movie.
You know, it was my choice to leave. That dang house was too big, for one thing.
Mm.
It was mutual, okay?
Right, right.
Has she mentioned me at all?
No. Excuse me.
She'll be begging me to come back, I'm telling you. You watch. They think they're over you, they get drunk, and they call. No, wait, that's what I do. Use the Schwartz! You like when the crew appeared in that shot? That's a little gag that runs through Mel Brooks's movies. It's kind of ironic that a flick that parodies George Lucas's Star Wars used George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic for some of the special effects. I'm sure you guys know this already, but Spaceballs was the first theatrical feature to make use of this Eastman Kodak color high-speed SA negative film 5295 with an exposure index of 400 and 3200 Kelvin tungsten light. Now, we all know that. But did you know that it featured dimensionally controlled perforations that exceeded PS ANSI standards? And it matched the sensitivity of the high-speed 5294 film and gave the sharpness of the medium-speed 5247. Now, I know you're all asking, well, if speed is an issue, why not just use the 5294 emulsion for blue screen? Well, anybody, do you know? That's because the beam splitter is behind the actors. You'd have problems with reflections. I can't believe you guys don't know this stuff. All right, commercials, and then back to Spaceballs. No, you can't use 5247. You'd need like 200 foot candles a key for a 4.5 stop. And obviously way more for an 8 or 11 stop. Where'd you guys go to school? Video Technical Institute? You know? Do you like the joke where they laser him to the crotch? Yeah, oh, you understand that. Man, we're just all over the lot now, aren't we? Great alien parody there, which then becomes the singing frog from the classic Warner Brothers cartoon, One Froggy Evening. And I love the circus crew escaping from the Spaceballs ship. And the newscaster on the TV looked vaguely familiar, didn't he? Who was that guy? John Weiner is Colonel Sanders. I didn't mention him yet. And of course, Mel Brooks plays the dual role of President Scroob. Spell it backwards and you get Brooks. Actually, spell it backwards and you get Burks. But pretty clever, Mel. And Yogurt, the 3-foot-tall, everlasting know-it-all. And hey, how come Rick Moranis hadn't been around more the last few years? I mean, he made it pretty big on SCTV, doing Bob and Doug McKenzie and with Dave Thomas. And then they made that movie, Strange Brew. And then he was in Ghostbusters, Little Shop of Horrors, Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Part 1 and 2, Parenthood, The Flintstones. For a while, he was the most sought-after comedy star in film. And then around 1994, it gets skimpy. His wife died of cancer. I know that in the early 90s. I hope that's not why he dropped out or anything, because that'd be really sad. But And now that I've brought everybody down, let's get back to the wacky comedy, Spaceballs. Sorry about that. Roll the commercials. Oh, and come to think of it, John Candy also died in 1994. So he and Rick Moranis were buddies from SCTV. Rick, if you're watching, write in. Tell me how you're doing, okay? We'll ask Count Floyd, Joe Flaherty. He'll know. Very scary.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Monstervision after these messages.
Mel Brooks always ends with a wedding, doesn't he? And this movie ends with Bill Pullman and Daphne Zuniga getting married. Bill Pullman actually did get married during the production of Spaceballs. He took a day off and tied the knot with a dancer named Tamara Hurwitz. And by the way, that was Mel Brooks' late writing partner, Ronnie Graham, as the minister. Of course, my favorite part was the homage to Planet of the Apes, which we're showing here 2 weeks from now. And next week, we've got Future Hunters, a movie that has everything. It's got kung fu, midgets with crossbows, Amazon women in bikinis, mysterious Filipino horsemen, and the gall-dang Spear of Destiny. We got that, so check that out. That's it for me, Joe Bob Briggs, reminding you that if the shortest sentence in the English language is I am, the longest sentence in the English language is I do. You guys know all about the Air Force's ultra-high security super secret base in Nevada, Area 51, right? You know about that? Yep. Well, late one afternoon, the Air Force folks out at Area 51 are surprised to see this Cessna landing at their secret base. So they immediately impound the aircraft and they haul the pilot into an interrogation room. And the pilot's story is that he took off from Vegas, he got lost, and he spotted the base just as he was about to run out of fuel. And so the Air Force runs a full FBI background check on the pilot, and they hold him overnight during the investigation. By the next day, they're convinced the pilot really was lost and he isn't a spy. So they gas up his airplane, they give him one of those terrifying "you did not see a base" briefings, you know, complete with threats of spending the rest of his life in prison. They tell him Vegas is that away on such and such a heading, and they send him on his way. Next day, the same Cessna shows up again. Once again, the MPs surround the plane, only this time there's 2 people in the plane. Same pilot jumps out and he says, "Do anything you want to me, but my wife is in the plane. You have to tell her where I was last night." Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the drive-in will never die. You know, space movies, they're so great because they make you think about the important things. The other night I was gazing at the brilliant full moon, and I thought, the same moon, I imagined to myself, at which Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato gazed. And suddenly I imagine that they have appeared beside me. And I tell Socrates about the national debate over one's right to die and wonder at the constancy of the human condition. I tell Plato that I live in the country that has come the closest to utopia, and I show him a copy of the Constitution. I tell Aristotle that we have found many more than 4 basic elements, and I show him the periodic table. Then I get a box of kitchen matches, and I strike one, and they gasp in wonder, and we spend the rest of the night lighting farts.